everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is a weekly update and I have 5 books to talk to you about today that I finished since last time. And before we get started, leave a knife or scalpel emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. So like always, we'll move from the lowest to the highest rated. And the first book I'll talk about today is a 3-star book, and that's A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this actually came out November 2nd. So this is, I would describe it as like adult historical urban fantasy / Regency romance, where one of our characters, Robin, is accidentally named as this civil service liaison to a hidden magical society. And he has to deal with learning about magic, a deadly curse, and his counterpart Edwin in the magical bureaucracy as they discover a plot that threatens every magician in the British Isles. So, admittedly, I'm somewhere between a 3 and a 3.5 star rating for this book, and I couldn't quite decide where I fall in that, but just generally in that range. I didn't love it as much as I expected I would, and I think the main issue for me is that I really had problems with the pacing in this book. Like, it felt very slow at times, especially in the beginning. It mostly focuses, I think, on the romance and family relationships, which is fine. It kind of lets this mystery fall by the wayside a little bit at times. And that's kind of, I think, where I started to struggle with the pacing. Like, there would be times where the mystery is just completely set aside for a few chapters where they work on the relationships. And I think, you know, that's fine to have relationships in books and everything like that, but I think it just didn't quite balance mystery and romance in the way that would have worked better for me. We don't get to learn a lot about the magical world or really like the rules behind the magic, but I did enjoy the magic that we get to see in general. It seems like there's some variety with abilities. There are some that I really liked that lean more towards nature magic and like bonds with the lands, and I really liked that aspect. I thought that the curse that we get here is interesting and certainly provided some high stakes for this story, though I do have some questions about some of the things that happen that are tied with it. I generally liked both Robin and Edwin and learning more about their family histories. Robin doesn't come from a magical society, so I really liked seeing him, well, one, learn that there's this entire magical world out there. And also, I think the joy that he feels in seeing magic sometimes, like, that's really lovely to see. He also comes from a family where his parents basically treat him as more of a status symbol than a person, and I really liked his bond with his sister, even though we don't really get to see her a ton. I do feel the chemistry and connection between Robin and Edwin, and it feels like they can really relate to and understand each other, especially with some of the family aspects for both of them, and I did like seeing them fall for each other. Also, just like FYI, there are some very explicit sex scenes here, so if that's not your thing, just be aware going into this. Edwin, I think, is much more reserved, especially because his family treats him as basically nothing because his magical abilities aren't very strong. It takes him a bit to open up, but I really liked seeing this happen with Robin. He has some skills with like investigation and scholarly pursuits that a lot of people don't really value in magical society because everything is kind of based on your skill and abilities as a, like a magic user. And I think it's really nice to see how Robin recognizes his skills in other areas. We do have a variety of side characters, most of whom were just kind of obnoxious, and I did keep getting them confused with Edwin's family and some of the side characters at their house in particular. I just had a very hard time keeping them all straight for some reason. I did like Robin's assistant, Miss Morrissey, but we don't get to see her very much, unfortunately. So this book had some moments that I really did enjoy, but I definitely struggled with the slower pacing, and I think that's kind of why I'm, between the 3.5 star rating. So I am a little bit undecided about continuing the series, but if you're interested in this sort of Regency romance with some magical aspects, I would recommend picking this up. The next 3-star book I'll talk about is When Villains Rise by Rebecca Schaeffer. So this is a YA urban fantasy, and this is the conclusion to this trilogy. So basically, like, with this series, we've had this black market for supernatural creatures, and our main character, Nita, has the boy who betrayed her in her grasp, but Covet's identity as a Zanny, and this is a monster who eats paint to survive, is leaked. So enemies are closing in, and Nita and Covet are trying to take down the black market and basically protect themselves once and for all. So I think this was a decent conclusion for the series. I definitely feel like the first book was by far the strongest installment of the trilogy, and I felt like some of the things that happened in this particular book were just a bit too easy, and I felt like I just generally expected a bit more from it. The pacing was alright. It's certainly quick and easy to read, but I do sometimes feel like more could be happening. There are some surprises, however, that I didn't see coming, which was nice, and we do get some background information on the INHUP, which is essentially an organization that deals with dangerous supernatural creatures, as well as this dangerous naturals list. And I definitely liked getting more of this information behind it and kind of learning about their, I guess, establishment in the world and what all they're involved in. Like, that's very interesting. In general, this series continues to have a nice dark feel to it. We have a lot of morally gray characters who are sometimes doing terrible things to survive. Nita is very much one of these morally gray characters. She makes some mistakes along the way because she doesn't think things through all the time. I think she's still dealing with trying to escape from her mom's influence and does have some really good realizations here about her parents. I did feel for her because, you know, she just wants to live her life, but she is also not the nicest person. And then Kovit continues to be very interesting, and I do like their relationship in general. I think both of them are not very good people, but they have a really strong bond, and it's nice to, like, see them together and have allies, I guess, in the world. I feel like there was a bit less character development in this book compared to previous ones, but I do like seeing Kovit learn to be a bit more flexible with his rules. We also get to see Fabricio again, and I kind of feel bad for him because he's also stuck in a bad situation, but I feel like I can understand him a lot better after getting some information in this book. And I do kind of root for him, I guess, almost, which is rather interesting considering that he betrays Nita. We do have some characters here that may be asexual and or aromantic, but it's not confirmed, but it's, you know, nice to see that representation. I do think there are things left unresolved here, but overall, I enjoyed this trilogy. I do think the first is by far the strongest, and it kind of went a little bit downhill for me from there. Like, I think I rated the first one 4 stars, the second one 3.5, and then this one 3 stars. But, you know, I think if you're in the mood for, like, a really dark YA urban fantasy that kind of leans into horror a bit, like, I would recommend picking this up. Also, just as a fun note, there's a sentence in this book that combines the titles of all 3 books, and I was like, oh, what a fun little tidbit, because that's always something that's really exciting, right? When you, like, read the book and you happen to find the title in the page, and you're like, ooh, I recognize that. So it was extra special getting to see all 3 books at once. So, yeah, like I said, not the strongest installment for me, but I did enjoy this trilogy as a whole. So now we'll move to 3.5 star books, and the first book I'll talk about here is When You Get the Chance by Emma Lord. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out January 4th. So this is a YA contemporary following Millie, who dreams of being a Broadway star. She discovers her dad's live journal from 2003 and finds 3 options for who her mother could be. She essentially tracks them down in a Mamma Mia type situation while also trying to convince her dad to let her pursue her dream. So I wanted to read this. I know YA contemporary is not generally my genre, but I read Tweet Cute by this author either a year or 2 ago and really enjoyed it. So I've been kind of keeping my eye on Emma Lord, and I did have a fun time with this, but I think I probably would have enjoyed it even more if I was into Broadway. Like, I'm not super invested in that, so there was like a little bit holding me back from fully enjoying it, but I still did have a fun time with this. I thought the reverse Mamma Mia situation here was quite funny in general. There was some great humor in the book, and as well as some serious moments. I think it blended these pretty nicely. The pacing was good overall. It's a quick read and kept me wanting to read, especially to figure out the identity of Millie's mom. And I will say I did actually guess who it was right before the reveal, but in general it was fun. We do have several plot threads here happening to keep it kind of interesting. We obviously have this who is her mom situation. We've got an enemies to lovers romance. There's an internship that Millie accepts. So, you know, there's just a whole bunch of things going on here, but I really liked all of these little elements here. We get to see Millie run around New York for various reasons, which was mostly fun, like, it's a fun setting. Millie is mostly likable as a main character. She is a very big personality, and she's determined to be successful and pursue her dream. She can't always control her emotions and has these, like, Millie moods where intense emotions threaten to overwhelm her. So I thought the exploration of this was really great, and I liked what happens with it in terms of trying to manage this and where it comes from. I did actually side with her dad and aunt on some things, and, like, maybe this is one of those things where it's like, you know, maybe I'm too old for this book, but, you know, Millie makes some bad decisions here, and I was like, oh, girl, I don't know if you should really be doing that. I kind of agree with your dad and your aunt here, but anyway, she does make some mistakes, so I like seeing her face them and try to fix them with her loved ones. I really enjoyed seeing her interact with her three potential mothers. There are some really sweet moments here, and I liked the overall resolution with the plot threads, even if it is a bit too tidy. I also liked her relationship with her dad and aunt, especially when Millie realizes how similar she is to her introverted dad in many ways. I also really liked her aunt and how involved she is with Millie's life. I think Millie doesn't initially appreciate this, but has some good realizations with it. I also liked Millie's friendship with her neighbor and basically her best friend, Teddy. They're essentially like siblings, and I loved how they do anything to help each other. They do go through some turmoil in this book, but I think their friendship is strong enough to overcome it. And then, of course, we have Oliver, who is kind of our love interest here. He's very different in personality to Millie, and he is competing with her for this internship. But I just really enjoyed seeing them together, especially when they go from hatred to actually enjoying spending time together. You know, I thought this was a good relationship. I rooted for it. I think Oliver is very sweet and supportive, and he does good things without always getting recognition for them. So overall, I think this was really cute. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as Tweet Cute, but I would still recommend it, especially if you like Broadway. I think you would absolutely love this. The other 3.5-star book I'll talk about today is The Suffering by Rin Chupeco. So this is YA horror, and this is the sequel to The Girl from the Well. And here we have Tark and Okiku, who are drawn to Japan's suicide forest. Okiku's justice is kind of becoming a little bit blurred, and Tark may pay the price for this. So it was nice to return to these characters after events from, the first book, but I don't think this was quite as good of a book as the previous one. I didn't feel like there were as many spooky parts here compared to the first one, which was a little bit unfortunate, but I do like the setting of the suicide forest as well as, this mysterious village that may or may not exist. We do get some interesting things happening here. There's like this ghost hunting TV show and restless spirits. So I think the pacing was good again with being generally fast paced, but I think it was a little bit more of a struggle to get into, perhaps because we're reading from Tark's point of view instead of Okiku's. There are some like typical teenage moments in the first part, like, going on dates. And I think this kind of held me back from really enjoying it more because I just wanted more murder and ghostly action, I guess. But things do pick up a lot once they go to Japan. I liked this setting a lot in particular, so it was really great to see that. I think it has a much more interesting mystery at that point, instead of, Tark and Okiku kind of sometimes hunting for bad guys at home in the first part. Tark has grown a bit more since we've seen him in the first book, and he's working with Okiku, so this is certainly an interesting relationship. Both are more on like the morally gray character side because they're trying to take justice into their own hands, but they do kill people. So I think Okiku does cross a line here, and Tark pushes back. So there's an interesting discussion with, their rules, and I feel like Tark is kind of figuring out his boundaries. I liked how he's been working on his skills for exorcising ghosts, and, he realizes he's got a skill, and he's trying to put it to good use. So that was fun to see. I think he does have a slightly more normal life here compared to the first one, but I think another thing that really held me back from enjoying this as much as the first one is that I really missed reading from Okiku's point of view. I feel like she was really reduced in this book. Like, it's much more Tark's book than Okiku's book, which is a shame. But I think this, somewhat ties in with Okiku's role changing from the first to the second book, but I just really miss reading about her being super creepy and killing people. Anyway, she still does some creepy things and kills people, but it feels a little bit more detached because we're not reading from her point of view. So I think this point of view change did contribute to the overall decreasing level of spookiness here. I mostly liked the bond between her and Tark, but I'm a little bit unsure about certain developments that happen here. We do have Tark's cousin returning here, but she doesn't play as much of a role as she did in the previous book, which is a bit of a shame because I did like her, but, she's at least present here. So, in general, I think this is a really great YA horror duology. I definitely prefer the first one, but I think this was still worth reading, especially because I liked this whole suicide forest setting and some of the, bridal ghosts that we get here. So if you're looking for that kind of vibe, I would recommend picking up this series. So the last book I'll talk about today is a 4-star book, and that's Well Matched by DeLuca. So this is adult romance, and this is the third book in this series that's set around a Rin fair. So we follow single mother April, who's on the verge of becoming an empty nester, and she asks her friend Mitch for help with some home renovation to sell her house. Mitch needs a favor in return as well, though, so he enlists her help to pretend to be his girlfriend at a family dinner to essentially get his family off his back. However, when the fair returns, this fake dating doesn't feel quite so fake anymore. So yet again, this was a really cute romance. I'm not surprised that I enjoyed this. I've really liked this series as a whole. I absolutely love returning to this whole Renaissance Festival setting. Like, that's something I really love, so getting to see it again is just absolutely wonderful. Though, interestingly enough, most of this book actually doesn't take place during the Ren Fair. It's, I think, before it, and then maybe, like, it's certainly after the halfway point, I think, where the Ren Fair returns to town. The pacing was great as usual. It's super easy to read, and I kept wanting to pick it back up. We do get some great humor here, but also some serious things. You know, I think that's been true of the previous books, but this time we tackle what being a single parent is like. It does this in a nice way that feels pretty realistic. It also deals with family expectations and feeling like you don't belong. April feels like she's never really fit into this town of Willow Creek, even though she's lived there for 12 years. And I can definitely relate to this feeling because I've felt that way in some of the places that I've lived before, where it's like, there's just something like holding me back from being like fully invested and feeling like it's home. April has some great moments of opening up and trying to connect with others and the town, and I really enjoyed seeing this. I also, just like as a side note, really love seeing the home renovation parts with April and Mitch. I thought that was fun. I really feel like April goes through a journey here, and I liked her character arc. She does have social anxiety and is introverted, and I think can generally be pretty private about her life, so it's great to see her be a little more adventurous, which is helped in part because of Mitch. I really loved them together. I think I was more on board here with the fake dating trope than, you know, the previous novel where there was like a bit of a catfishing element here. But we also have a Grump and Sunshine dynamic, which is actually reversed, with April being more of the Grump and Mitch being more of a Sunshine. So that was really fun. I think there's a lot of great tropes here. There's like the only one bed trope, which is, you know, fabulous. I will say, I think one of the big reasons why I rated this 4 instead of like 4.5 or 5 stars was that I did get a little bit frustrated with April at times for some of her actions. It's weird because, like, on one hand I can understand where she's coming from, but on the other I was like, oh my god, just like open up, please, like go talk to Mitch. So obviously I adore Mitch. I think he's extremely nice and wants to help. I love how supportive he is of April. I definitely felt for him with his family. They kind of look down on him for like only being a gym teacher, even though that's like what he wants to do in his life, and he feels happy and satisfied with what he's done. And like, I think his family doesn't realize quite how much he does in town and like how involved he is with the community. We do have some nice people in his family, like his cousin Lulu, who we get to follow in the next book, so I'm excited for that. But, you know, there are certainly some who are jerks and just haven't really tried to understand what Mitch's life is really like. I love seeing April stand up for him, and I think both April and Mitch stand up for each other several times throughout the book, and that's just fabulous to see. There's some really excellent moments with them supporting each other, and I think just their relationship is, I was all on board for that. We get to see returning characters again here, like Emily, who's April's sister, and Simon, her husband, as well as Stacy, who is the main character from the previous book. So this is just really great to see returning characters again. That's like a fun little, hey, I recognize them, you know? And I like seeing how they support April and totally root for this relationship. So I definitely recommend this series. I've really had such a great time with it, and I can't wait for the next one, which is like, it's going to be a long wait. I think it's next fall is when it's supposed to come out, so like, maybe I should have planned these out a little bit better, because I did just recently read the second book, and you know, now I have to wait instead of just trying to spread things out a little more. But anyway, these are good problems to have. So if you're looking for, again, just a really great romance, especially one that's set at a Renaissance festival, I would recommend this series for sure. So with that, those are all the books that I have to talk to you about today. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of them or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, do you enjoy Broadway? So I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link's in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, because that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.